So how often can any one of your care or nursing homes get press coverage? Particularly, we're talking about today on the regional media. That's going to be newspapers, regional newspapers online, BBC Radio, ITV and BBC Television. So how often can your care or nursing homes get positive press coverage in your target regional media in, let's say, over the course of 12 months? And to recap, if you are wanting to amplify the word of mouth reputation of your care and nursing homes, if you want to celebrate and showcase your home and your quality of care and your staff because you want more people to know about you, because ultimately you want to get more inquiries, particularly from self-funding families, then ongoing press coverage, that's journalists writing or broadcasting about your care homes in a positive way, is one way that many care providers achieve this. So, there are essentially 5 factors that depend upon how often your care and nursing homes can get positive press coverage. Looking at it very generally, I would say every 6 weeks or 2 months, roughly, but there are many variables in this. Could be more, it could sometimes, and when I say more, I mean that's on more occasions during the course of 12 months, or it could be less, depending again upon what media it is. But there are 5 main areas. And the first area the first factor that determines how often you can get positive press coverage and positive PR over the course of 12 months is, as I've alluded to, what type of media that may be. So whether that be newspapers writing about your positive stories, or whether that be BBC radio, for example, for television and newspapers, television and the BBC and ITV. So if, and I'll come on to this later on this video, if you are able to develop good relationships, I will come on to this with your broadcasters, that can make a difference in how often you get coverage. But the first thing you need to consider is who you are pitching these stories to, your stories to. Now, some providers, for whatever reason, are less keen or more averse to having television cameras coming round to the care and nursing homes, or having their manager or whoever it may be featured on radio channels, particularly BBC Radio, who do love good care provider stories. So that's going to be one factor. But certainly, if you are looking at your regional newspapers and you encompass all of those media outlets, which include broadcast and radio, again, that will increase the number of times and coverage you can get per year for any one of your care and nursing homes. And the second element, the second point is, and this is probably the most important, is the stories and quality of stories that you have. Now, I always say that if I walked into, or any of my colleagues walked into a care or nursing home right now, we would probably be able to identify 4 or 5 stories straight off the cuff that would be great to pitch to your regional media, and that would include television and radio. And these stories may vary from anything from long-standing members of staff who love working in care, to a dementia initiative that you have, to perhaps examples of great personalized care, of an interesting and powerful human interest story that's coming from your home, or maybe how you do intergenerational activities, or perhaps you have a particular focus on reminiscence therapy, or perhaps you're celebrating in a particular way the special birthday of someone who may be well into their 100s. It does all depend upon the stories, and also whether or not you have the permissions from the residents, perhaps your families, and to what extent that they are happy to be involved. Now, 9 times out of 10, literally 9 times out of 10, residents and their families are more than always happy to be involved in media pitches and getting featured, and their stories being featured in the press. To be honest, usually it's really something very, very special for them, and it's something that we've found surround residents and their families are absolutely delighted to be involved in, as it is for staff and for your team members. The third aspect and the first factor that determines how often you can get your care and nursing homes covered in the press is the editorial policies of the media in your target area, and to what extent they are quite strict or not. Now, what I'm particularly referring to here is some regional media outlets, whether that be, I know there's not so many of them now, but whether it be daily papers or paid for, or their particular publishing and editorial details. But some outlets and some media are much more stringent in the stories that they take. So what that means is that your story may have to be particularly strong to get the coverage. Some publications we find, for example, in the Surrey and Sussex areas, have very, very strict editorial standards for your story from a care or nursing home to get coverage, compared to some press outlets in other parts of the country. So it's very, very important when you are doing PR strategies and press coverage strategies and pitching for your care provider that you know the kinds of stories that the press outlets are most likely to be interested in. And there's various ways and means that you can do that. But it's getting familiarity with the media and knowing them well is one way to make sure that your success rates in pitching to those target media are increased. And we have a procedure where we want to make sure that every pitch we are making on behalf of a care provider has at least a 90% chance of getting coverage. And that's what you need to be going for when you're thinking about your target media outlets, who, as I say, will have different editorial policies and standards according to which media outlet they are and which part of the country they are. Now, number 4, the fourth element is the relationships that you have with your journalists in your area. Now, to be honest, if you remember what I said on number 2 about the importance of stories, always, 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 the story that you pitch is the most important element, bar none. I hear often about some PR pros boasting and talking about the contacts they have and the relationships they have with particular journalists. And by the way, this is pertinent not only to the regional media outlets, but also to national media outlets. Again, the importance of particular contacts. Now, I would advise you and say that it's always, always the quality of story that you pitch, which is the most important element, bar none. I always talk to people on this, that if, let's say, my uncle is editor of The Guardian or The Telegraph or The Sun or The Mirror or your main local newspaper, what my uncle is most interested in is the story that I have for him, or she is my aunt. And the point I'm getting at here is that, yes, it can be useful to have contacts, but the story that you pitch is the most important. Same again, if no one knows about me and I pitch a great story to the editor of BBC Newsnight, imagine that, and it's an amazing story and it's exclusive, that's what those journalists are interested in. However, having said that, if you are able to build a good working relationships with your regional media journalists, that can be useful. And it's particularly useful when it comes to local television, BBC and ITV broadcasters. If you can be top of their list as a care or nursing home who's willing and happy to provide good news stories and provide expertise, you will become their go-to expert for care issues in their area. And that's a great place to be, because then you'll find, and this is something that we have found often, is that those journalists will then be coming to you and asking you to be involved. And you can choose whether you want to or not, but it can start to position your team as experts, bar none, on care and social care and dementia in your area. Because let me maybe emphasize this. Your your care teams are the experts in social care and looking after our elderly in your area. You are the experts, and you have an expertise in this. So that's why if you can build those relationships with those journalists, they will be coming to you. And those relationships are best built by pitching good stories. So then those journalists come back to you later asking for you to be involved. And when this works in great momentum, it does really wield powerful ongoing results. The fifth element on how often you can secure positive media exposure for any one of your care homes is the power of the pitch and the follow-up. So what I mean by that is that when you are making those pitches, to make sure the pitch goes to the right journalist on the right outlets, it's not sent to a generic email address, but it goes to a named individual, and you know how to contact them by phone, by Twitter, for example, by their social media channels. Ideally, after you build that relationship that I've talked to previously, you will have even their mobile phone numbers so you can send them texts. And the pitch and how you pitch and making sure it gets to the right person, your particular powerful story or good news story that you are pitching, is absolutely vital. It's probably second to the story that you have is the most important element. How you pitch and to make sure that journalist gets it and receives your pitch, and then also on the follow-up. So often if you pitch a story to a particular journalist, you will never hear back first time. 9 times out of 10. It's not to say they've not got your story and they're not interested, but they've never got round to responding. So what I always encourage providers to do is to make sure they have a sound process for follow-up, and that means checking with them after you sent them your story that they have received it. That's all you need to do, to check that they've received it. And now there are ways and processes on this follow-up and how best to do the follow-up, but sometimes 3, 4, 5 times you will need to follow up until you even get a response that they've got your story, they're interested, they cover it, or maybe they want a few more details, or maybe they want a few more different photos or better photos or additional quotes. And those are the added elements that sometimes that you may be required to provide once you have done that follow-up. But yes, you do have to follow up. Please do not give up after you've sent one email and perhaps one phone call and that's it. To really get results, the results are in the follow-up, because let's remember also with the follow-up that can, if you do it politely and courteously, and you can, and remember you're always going to be pitching a good news story, and let me emphasize, journalists in the regional media love good care home stories, then that pitching will help and not only increase the chances of that story getting coverage, but will also enable you to build up that relationship, particularly when you start working with the local media. And again, this refers to television, radio, and newspapers stroke online, is getting going and getting a relationship with those journalists, which is best started by providing them with a great story, is the way to get there, is best done by this initial pitching and follow up. So those are the 5 elements, and I hope that helps.